My earliest memory of art is probably my interactions with my granddad. On my mom's side, he was an artist who had a whole wide variety of styles. So I remember, obviously, as a young child, just going to visit my grandparents and seeing all the crazy art on the walls in his house, and going to his studio space and hearing stories from him about all kinds of different zany, creative things. And so he was definitely an early influence in my life, and probably one of my earliest memories of encountering art myself. My love. One piece that's currently in the gallery, the one that I think that was posted online, the red burgundy one. So my grandfather died in the late 80s, and over time I ended up inheriting all his former art supplies, which included a bunch of paintbrushes and also panels, and some of the panels he'd actually started painting on. And so that particular piece is one of the panels he started painting an underlayer on. And so I did a few, it took me, I don't know, 15 years before I felt like I was ready to paint on these panels that were left behind for me. And so I added my own imagery and my own layers on top of the artwork. Mostly it was just like colored underpainting that he had done. So I did a few paintings like that kind of were very meaningful to me, to like layer on top of what he had already started. So besides that, yeah, other influences, I mean, he really, other influences in my current art series, I think related to the diversity of the work that I do, because he explored all kinds of different kinds of projects, from abstract to surreal to realism. So probably just that range of exploring any number of issues and not worried about getting stuck in one style or defining yourself by one style. It would be, yeah. I think when I first exhibited them, I didn't have them for sale, and then I did, and then I felt like I don't know, it's kind of like, I mean, I'm a male, so I haven't given birth, but it's certainly lots of people have given that analogy of like being an artist is like you're making all these children, and you're ready to let them go out into the world to sell them. So eventually I was ready to let it sell, and one of those pieces did sell to someone who I know, and so it was, and they bought it for the same reason. Like, they were really drawn to it, and then when they heard the story behind it, they were buying it as a memory of their grandmother that recently passed away. So it was just they kind of tapped into this intergenerationality of it somehow. My art background, lots of, when I was very young, just lots of freedom of expression. My parents obviously saw that I had a slant towards making art, and I would spend a lot of time in my room drawing and collecting weird material from the dump down the road and making random pieces of sculpture and stuff. So there was a lot of self-directed learning, and then I went on to art school after high school, knowing that it was deep within me and I needed to pursue it on a more accredited level, and then pursue it professionally. Yeah. So my artistic process is sort of a balance between material on one hand and concept on the other. So sometimes I focus more on one or the other to start, and other times it's a sort of melding of the two. But so what I mean by that is sometimes my ideas come when I'm playing with the material. It could be playing with paint, it could be playing with scrap found objects that I have discovered that I arrange in interesting ways. And then the idea starts to gel from that. And then at other times the ignition point is more like I have an idea and I have to try to find the right kind of material that I want to use to communicate this idea. And then at some point, even though I've started on one or the other way, they both start to meld, and then it sort of oscillates between the two as I sort of refine my vision. I really like the unknown aspect of it. And this is what I try to instill in my students, since I'm an art teacher as well, is it's okay to not know where you are at in the process, and just playing with things is a great way to discover things. And so I just love the process of discovery. Rarely do what I make reflect entirely what I've had in my mind, because things change as I make them. So I just love that uncertainty, that unknown aspect of creation. I guess there's various ways it's changed over time. Certainly, as I follow my own interests, my interests take me to different directions, and so therefore sometimes I have to discover new processes to apply what I want to say. But also just my path through life has changed my practice a little bit, because at one point in my life I was fairly free from commitments, responsibilities, besides just applying myself to my own creative vision. But then of course structures start to add into your life as you become older in the adult world. Getting a steady job as a teacher, so I had to sort of work around that. Becoming a parent and having young kids around, I had to work with that. At one point I realized I started making much smaller pieces when I had little babies and family started. Whether that was because I only had time to dart to the studio and work on little pieces at once, or because my mind was just thinking of little things. So I see that kind of thing echoing in my pattern of my practice. It's not always an easy base to know exactly when a painting is done. There's often a time when I'll come to a point where I realize there's nothing else that I can think of to do on a painting. And that's usually a sign that I need to just stop fiddling with it. But then I might not consider it done yet. So I'll put it on the wall, either in my studio or in my house, or sometimes just leave it just leaned up somewhere. And then just in my day-to-day going about doing things, keep encountering it, go back and look at it, and over time I'll process it a little more. And sometimes after a couple of weeks I'll be like, that needs something in this section, I need to still work on it. And other times I'll be like, okay, I think that is done, there's nothing else that I feel like it needs on it. Fish first came into my artwork probably in the early 2000s, around the time that I moved to Smithers, or first came through Smithers. I can think of other pieces before that had fish-like elements, but for this particular series, the form of the fish came to me around that time, because in this area here, I'm from the east, or center Ontario of Canada, and so coming west, it was very impactful to see the environment, the mountains, the rivers, and of course the salmon that swim in the rivers. And I was doing a series of work at the time related to almost like fossils and botanical kinds of almost like prehistoric seeming formations. I was mixing wood ash in with paint to make very chunky kinds of paintings. And I was researching early animals of this area, and there was a prehistoric salmon that really caught my eye. And so I started making these stencil paintings of prehistoric salmon with really chunky ash, made it look really fossilized. Eventually it evolved into using the modern contemporary form of salmon, and then I just love the interplay of positive and negative space, of whatever color I used or whatever kind of paintbrush action I used to play with that. And then I just kept building and building that. So it was sort of a slow start to it. I had like sporadic salmon related works in the early 2000s, and then over the last probably 8 years I've done done more of that particular series. Yeah. And salmon are important, obviously, for cultural reasons and natural, ecological kind of reasons around here in northwestern BC. Yeah, definitely. Education is a two-way street, and I never have seen teaching as like a master and student kind of setup. My goal is to basically provide a creative environment for students to really explore things. So just with that mentality, with the goal of open exploration, we're kind of inspiring each other. I can help students tap into their unearthed creative zones, because they're still young and figuring out what materials there are out there, how to express ideas. They're still very much, in general, relying on existing artwork to inspire them. But there's an amazing energy of hunger and wide-eyed sort of openness to things. And so that also just keeps me energetic as well. And sometimes in a conversation with a student or in sharing art ideas, we just break through new frontiers that way. And so I definitely feel inspired by my students as well. So the various artistic barriers I've encountered, I mean, sometimes there's a paralysis. You don't know what you want to do next, what project to do, even though I've got sketchbooks full of different ideas that I've accumulated over the years. But sometimes, they lose their momentum or whatever. And sometimes after I'm done a particular series of projects, I'm not sure what to do next, or I feel I'm stuck. It's just like writer's block, creative block, that kind of thing. But I've never really felt fearful of that, because I know that something will be flowing eventually, especially just if I can carry on living my life. There'll be things that filter in, and then I'll be able to refine my ideas and come up with new ideas, or revisit old ones, that kind of thing. Or even just sitting and flipping through my sketchbook sometimes will be like, oh yeah, that idea I had. Now I'm looking at it through different eyes, and now I have a different idea of what direction to take it. Yeah, so I'm as I mentioned with my earlier paintings of prehistoric salmon, I was mixing wood ashes in with paint, and so that made a very thick, chunky surface, and I liked the kind of crackling that happened with that. And so I started to look for other materials that I could achieve that similar effect with. And I came across this, somewhere 20 years ago, I came across this material called gum arabic, which is often used in lithography printing, also in watercolor a little bit. And I just discovered that when you lay down a layer of that and then put a layer of acrylic on top of that, it reacts in a way that it destabilizes the paint and gives it that crackle effect. And so there's still that ancient look that I like, but with less of the thickness of the chunky paint. But still, so you can see the layers beneath, and it gives it that distressed look as well. Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because when I think of, if I were to go back in some of my old sketchbooks, I have some ideas in there that were definitely grandiose and wide-ranging, and I remember thinking, I'll never have the time or resources to get something like this off the ground. So, but if I was just given unlimited time and resources, I don't know if I could pinpoint what specific project it would be, but it would definitely combine a bunch of aspects of my interests, including painting and installation, creating a large environment that people could come into and experience it, and also participatory aspects. So I was really interested in drawing in people's own contribution components to artwork, if I was thinking large scale like that. And also, I would want to collaborate with other people, because in this day and age, I find that there's so many other unique voices out there. I'd like to bring in them in a more comprehensive way.